Well, first of all, I'm going to bring not 8 years of experience when Stockton was going through its worst financial crisis in the history of this city, along with other things that were going on at the time. Being able to run a city with losing 100 police officers and being able to run a city with no resources, monetary resources to do anything with. You know, most businesses in the situation that we were in the city could close its doors and regroup, but not the city of Stockton. We still had to remain open, and we still had to provide resources and services to our constituency, which is the citizens of the city of Stockton. So being able to do that under the crisis that we were in took a lot of gut-wrenching decisions that had to be made, and I think I've gone through that with the rest of my council members, and that experience is embedded in my heart right now. So as moving forward in these better times, I will be able to bring things to the council that through the experience that I went through that I think will benefit them in making decisions going forward.
It's interesting because I watched the interview where you were selected by the council back 8 years ago, and they asked you what the main three problems were, or the main three things that the council needed to accomplish, and you talked about being fiscally responsible, you talked about crime, and you talked about economic development. So here we are 8 years later. In a sense, nothing's really changed, has it?
No, nothing's really changed, and actually, Roger, that was just my thought of what a council should do, because my preparation for that interview was I didn't retire from law enforcement saying I want to be a city councilman. So I started, but there's a group called the Good Government Group. And the Good Government Group got a hold of me, and they said, we think that you would make a good public servant in an elected position. And we're giving classes, Bob Benedetti from the University of Pacific, we're going to be giving classes, and would you mind coming? I really didn't want to, but they browbeat me, and I came. Well, the things that I heard from the various leaders of these different areas led me to know that this area here, these are the things that need to be dealt with if this is going to be a viable community. And so when I came to the council meeting, I espoused those things as being the things that really needed to be dealt with. Not knowing that the crisis that the city was actually in economically, but I knew that the city needed to be a viable economic entity. And I knew that there are a lot of people, even some friends and acquaintances that I know that they're having a hard time finding a job, and so job development was an issue, and naturally coming out of law enforcement, I knew that crime was an issue.
Let me ask you if you can go back to when you were a young person here.
It's a long time ago.
You were mentioning about basically not living on the south side and really not being able to go up north in Stockton just because those were the times and that's how things were. What else could you not do back then? What other conditions were different than in terms of race and
in terms of getting a job? You were probably the thing, last hired, first fired kind of atmosphere. The good jobs, I never had a paper route, with kids. You never had where I could work at a gas station or, be a bag boy at a store. Those kinds of jobs weren't open to us. We didn't get those kinds of opportunities. If we wanted to make money as a kid, we had to go out to the fields and work and pick fruit and do the hard labor kind of jobs. Where I've got friends today that are my age that are Caucasian, or they had jobs of being a convenience bag boy and helping people to their women to their car and things like that. We didn't get those kind of jobs. And as I look back, it wasn't like that was happening to me because I'm black. That revelation came later on as I got older, and then I looked back and could see that was probably the reason.
You tried to get some of those jobs?
They weren't even available to us to even try to get them, you know. And this thing about North Stockton, that was kind of an unwritten law, you know. Unless you actually were confronted, you didn't even know it existed. I remember being about 17 years old, 16, driving and pulled over for no reason by a Stockton police officer. And he pulled me over and he walked up to the car and he says, "What are you doing out here?" And I said, "What?" He says, "Where do you live?" You know, and I said, "Well, I live on the south side." He said, "Don't you think you ought to be getting back over there?" And the words, I mean, you didn't argue, you know, it was like, "Yes, sir."
Do you remember where that was?
Pacific Avenue.
Pacific Avenue.
On the Miracle Mile.
On the Miracle Mile. And what was kind of the dividing line? Was it Harding Way?
Harding
or
Way.
Harding Way.
Well, actually, it was Main Street.
Not being from here. I'm just,
Yeah, it was actually Main Street. We didn't go north of Main Street, but this is sort of demilitarized zone between Main Street and Harding Way. Yeah.
Mhm.
You can be out in here because you can go to the Civic Auditorium and things like that, you know. But yeah, that was sort of just an unwritten rule.
Did you, so when that police officer said that to you, did you immediately turn around and head back?
Head back to the south side.
Were you scared?
Not shaky scared, but concerned, you know, of what might happen if I didn't, you know, heed that little subtle hint, you know, so I didn't want any issues. So I just went back and drove around on the south side.
And it's interesting that from there, you ended up pursuing a career in law enforcement.
Yeah, and that was at the behest of Floyd Weaver's brother, Clifford Weaver. And Clifford Weaver was like a father to me, and he was a commander on the San Joaquin County Sheriff's Department. And I was married at the time, and I was in need of a job because I had 2 daughters. And he suggested I take the sheriff's test. Well, I had 1 daughter, 1 on the way. And so I took the test for the sheriff's department, not wanting to be a cop. I mean, that was like, but I needed the money because they were paying like $700 a month, you know.
What were you doing at that time?
I was a student at University Pacific.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I took the test with about 150 other individuals on the first floor of the old Stockton Hotel. And my first thought as I was taking this test is, I ain't getting this job. I'm not getting this job, but I'll take the test. I took the test. I was probably the only African American there. And after I took the test, I passed it, in the top 10% of those that were there. Shortly afterwards, Sheriff Michael Canlis called me on the phone, and he says, asked me to come down to his office, and I came down to his office, and he says, "We see that you're on our list for hiring." He says, "And we're trying to reach you on this list." And he says, "We would really be appreciative if you don't take another job anywhere else until we get to you, and we want to hire you." That was like in February of 1971. They hired me in September, so it went that long. And in September, I was hired as a deputy sheriff, and I figured I would do this for a little while, and until I get where I want to go, and then I'm going to leave. And that was 34 years later that I left law enforcement.
And what was it that you thought you were going to do instead of being in law enforcement?
I was a business administration major, and I wanted to get into personnel management.
Did you get your degree at Pacific?
No.
You didn't?
I did not, because I liked that job so well, and it was hard. It got harder to go to school and do that job because I changed shifts every month, you know, and so I was weighing, do I stay? And so what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to let the school thing go because I'm making $700 a month here. I got 2 kids because my second daughter was born. I was hired. She was born in August of 71. I was hired September of 71. So now I had 2 daughters and a baby, and I'm in which one I'm making $700 a month here. I said, I'll go back. and I'll let this go, and then I'll go back to school later. And I went into the job, and I stayed. I mean, it was like throwing a fish in the water. It was appealed to me. It was my calling, and I was in law enforcement there, and I stayed, and I'm glad I did. It was a great career.
$700 a month,
Yes.
$8,400 a year, and you could make it on that back then.
Oh
huh?
yeah, it was a lot of money.
Uh-huh.
It was a lot of money. I mean, it was like, I can't believe I couldn't believe they were paying me that much to do that job.
Yeah.
But it was very good for my family at the time. So I chose that over, and I was making more money there than most graduates that were graduating from college at the time. So I was like, okay, I can do this.
Going back a little bit earlier in your life, did you actually work in the fields?
Yes.
What?
From 12 years old, I started working in the fields, because at 12 you had to have a work permit. And so we couldn't wait until we were 12 years old that we could come down here to the Stockton Unified School District building there on Madison Street, and we could bring our birth certificate in, and they would give us a work permit. And what we would do is get up at 4 o'clock in the morning from, at the time I lived on Spring Street in South Stockton. We would walk from Spring Street to downtown Stockton at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we would catch a labor bus that would take us somewhere, depending on what they were picking that day and what labor bus you can get on. And you would get on that bus, you would go out and you would pick. I worked right next to Braceros. Remember the Bracero program? I worked right next to them. And then back in those days, when you picked tomatoes, the tomatoes were in those wooden lug boxes. And so at 12, you're carrying those lug boxes because you picked the tomatoes and you put them in the lug box, then you carried the lug box to the end of your row and you stacked it. And you got paid by the guy walking down and marking those, and you got paid by the lug box. Today, the truck drives out into the field and you pick them in a bucket and you walk a couple of rows over, you hand them to a guy who dumps them. But when I worked, we had to do that. And then we did short handle hoe. That's outlawed now, but we hoed the weeds out of celery. We cut asparagus. We picked peaches. I don't think I did anything. Oh, windrowed onions and topped onions. Those were the jobs that we did, and we worked every day of the summer just about, where you could get up and go out there and work in the fields. Yeah, those were the only jobs that we could get.
And it was hot out there.
Hot. And peat dirt itches when it gets on you, and it sticks to your skin when it's, so you learn how to tie your sleeves down and tie your pants legs down so it doesn't, because it's very itchy, and you wear a bandana around your neck, but you go out there and you work all day. Heat it didn't bother us.
Not during the school year, though.
Not during the school year, only the summer.
What schools did you go to?
I went to Martin Van Buren Elementary School, which is on 10th Street there in Sierra Vista. And then my parents were able to buy a house, and we moved a few blocks north to Spring Street. And so when we moved up there, I attended Garfield Elementary School. And then from Garfield, I went to Stockton Junior High for half a semester, because Hamilton Junior High wasn't built yet. And then the next half of that semester, the 7th grade, I went to Hamilton Junior High School, and then I went to Edison. I graduated from Edison in 1967. Yeah.
So, looking back on your time in the council so far, what do you feel was your biggest frustration or disappointment?
Frustrations and disappointment. Which ones do I start with? My biggest frustration, actually, when you take an opportunity like this, being a city council member, you have visions of, helping and developing ideas that are going to make your community better and so forth. My biggest frustration was not being able to do a lot of things, because it was there were so many needs in this city, but we were unable to take action on doing a lot of them because we didn't have the funds or the means, or the economic situation was so bad. most of the energy was righting this ship rather than that. And that was frustrating for me because there were people that came before the council and proposals that came before the council and needs that arose in my district, that really needed attention. And we were, cutting things rather than adding things. And that was frustrating for me, because you do want to help. My mentality has always been, I was a first responder, and you want to do something when you get there. Well, I'm here and I can't do anything. That was frustrating.
Yeah, and it's learning that, I guess, the results that you would really like to see instantly.
Yes.
Take a long time, and in the meantime, the people who really need things
Right.
are forced to wait.
But then that also, opened my eyes to the point that I understand what my role now has got to be. My role has got to be to fix this thing so that future councils, when they come, can do those things that need to be done. Because if we didn't do what we needed to have done, generations of councils would be in the same situation that I was in, and probably worse. You know what I mean? So I knew that we were at the point of the situation where we could fix it, because that was Bob Dice's statement to us. He says, we're in a bad way. He says, but it's fixable. And he says, but the things that you're going to have to do to fix it are going to be so draconian. He says, actually, some of you are going to lose your seat on the council. He says, but if you do what needs to be done, you're going to fix this. And so the council 7-0 said, let's fix it. So that's when I understood what my role was. I couldn't do the things that frustrated me, but I knew that we had to take a hit for the team that's coming later that's going to be able to do those things.
And what would you, if you had to point to something that you're proudest of, or that you view as maybe the biggest thing that you accomplished so far?
It's fixing this fiscal crisis. It was devastating. It really was. It was worse than people really realized. When we took the first fiscal emergency, I believe we were 30 days away from not making payroll. In a city this size, that's huge. And now we put $70 million in reserve. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment from where we were. Now, we lose 100 police officers or thereabouts. Now we're hiring way more than that, and we think we've put a thumb in the dike as far as them losing officers. We're slowing it down at least, and that means that we're going to obtain more police officers, giving our police chiefs to make our communities safer, and that's an accomplishment. So those were the biggest things that I think citywide that I was part of accomplishing, because I'm the only council member that was there for every single vote on the fiscal crisis that the city's been in.
So let's say it was 2 years from now and the charter was different. Would you run for a third term?
Let's see, was my wife going to see this? No. I would consider it. I would consider it because there's still a lot to do. And I like the fact that the makeup of this new council that we are going to seat next Tuesday, I see great things coming out of this council for the city. And working in that capacity, my heart's still there for the city of Stockton. And if the voters felt like there was something that I could contribute, I'd step up. Yeah, no question.
Not going to happen.
No, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Just wondering.
Yeah, no, it's not going to happen. And but I would step up.
Do you have any second thoughts? There was a time where you were considering running for mayor, and you decided to run for the Board of Supervisors instead.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had a moment, a twinge of regret about that decision?
I did, until I knew that Michael was going to be our mayor, because my concern was for the leadership of this city. And once I was sure that Michael was going to be there, then I'm okay. I'm okay with it. But yeah, I thought about it. I was torn when I made the decision to run for the Board of Supervisors. See, when I made that decision, you notice that I made my decision to run for the board way after my two opponents had already made their decision. Because at the time, we weren't out of bankruptcy. And I was the only council member with the institutional knowledge if we would have had to go back and redo our plan of adjustment. And I felt an obligation to the city to remain here. Well, it was like February that year that Judge Klein was out of bankruptcy, and I announced for the Board of Supervisors that March. So I really only ran my campaign from March to June. And we still almost pulled it off. We still almost, we were in the final with Supervisor Patty, and it was between him and I that were going to challenge Moses for the seat. And it was something like 250 votes. I think we would have done much better had we been able to announce earlier and had more time to campaign. But that's just the way the ball falls, and we put it out there, and the voters spoke, and we're okay with that.
So is 2 years from now the end of your career in politics?
I say that now, but one never knows what happens. I wasn't planning on getting into politics when I came to politics. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I actually was retired for 4 years before I actually got involved in this, and I was enjoying every minute of it. I was just getting to the point where I could sleep all night without one eye open. Because every time something happened in this city or this county, I got called. And so I never got a good night's sleep because something was happening all the time, and I would be waking in the middle of the night, and I would be asked, either to send out a team because it's an officer-involved incident or critical incident, or before that, I was the supervisor of the homicide division of the sheriff's office. So every time there was a murder, I got called, and then I would have one of my team go out. So I never slept sound all night, hardly, for many years. And after I retired, it took me 4 years to get to the point, okay, my phone's not going to ring. Thank you, Jesus. and then I got involved in this stuff. And now I'm up pacing the ground trying to figure out what's the best thing to do here in this situation. But other than that, yeah, a first responder is in my blood, and what first responders do is when they get to where it is they're responding to, their mantra is to fix it. And if I get called, I'm going to respond. It's just there. And it'll always be there.